Welcome everyone to Urban Healers Podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Naylor Lillard. I am one of the mental health therapist associates at Urban Healing Counseling. Urban Healing Counseling and Urban Healers Podcast was founded by our wonderful CEO, Jamillah Sattler, who cultivates an environment where asking for help is our greatest strength. Today, we are welcoming back our phenomenal and fabulous executive director, Jamillah Jackson Kelly. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Now, what about for the caregivers or anyone who stands in the role of a caregiver or a mom, that might be struggling, not just with being emotionally overwhelmed, but struggling to understand why and sort of how do they navigate if they did seek support, whether if it's in a group, online, or even with therapy? Can you sort of walk us through how forgiveness can be a powerful tool that leads up to acceptance in therapy?
Yes. It's wonderful because they actually are very much linked. And so when we think of forgiveness, we often think of it in an interpersonal relationship with someone else, right? Like, someone did something to me and, I either forgave them or I didn't, and this is how it moved on. But when we think about our relationship with ourselves, which honestly is one of the most important relationships we're going to have in our lives, self-forgiveness is so important because it allows us to move on as well. Because when we think about, forgiving someone else, it really relieves a burden for ourselves. And that's why, we encourage folks to forgive others. Even if you never even talk to that person, if you just forgive them inside, it changes things for you. And even if they don't know. So the same thing applies for us. If we forgive ourselves, things change inside for us and it removes those blocks so that we can move forward and be our better versions of ourselves. And so, yes, when we remove that block, that burden that's in the way, it allows for acceptance to come in. And acceptance of kind of our current reality, of what's possible, in the future. A lot of times forgiveness, it makes us kind of stay lingering in the past and we want to move forward. And so really removing that burden, that self-forgiveness, it helps us move into the present and make way for acceptance of new things in the future.
Wow, that is just excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Jamillah. In the spirit of what you just said about forgiveness, I'm reminded of a poem by Emily Gamble, where she sort of gives a lot of themes and metaphors in her poem about forgiveness. And I wanted to read you a couple of lines just to get your takeaways or your feedback. And audience, when this goes out and shared on the YouTube channel, we would love for your feedback, in this too, after hearing this. So one of the things she says is, forgiveness is the process of letting go. What do you think about that, Jamillah? The process
Yes, I agree. Because it's not just a one-time event, right? When we think to forgive someone, ourselves or others, we really have to ponder, the injury that they caused us, the hurt that we received. Am I really ready to let this go? And it doesn't just, wash away like the ocean, waves is washing on the shore. It really takes time to be like, okay, I think maybe it wasn't intentional, or maybe, they didn't know it would affect me like this. There's different parts we can kind of dissect it, and piece by piece, as we make sense of it all. And even if we can't make sense of the whole thing, we make sense of enough of it to say, you know what, this doesn't really serve me anymore to hold on to it. And so I'm going to let it go. But again, it takes time. It takes time. And so back to the beach metaphor, it's slowly eroding away as the waves come up to shore over and over again. And then eventually it'll be cleaned away. But it's definitely not in those first, couple times that the tide comes in. It's gonna be a while. Part of that process.
That is critical. And I really like the way you frame that, because it makes it clear to a lot of our listeners as to some of the things that you may be thinking of or have to navigate. One of the other lines in the poem that I wanted to ask you about, and it sort of lines up exactly with what you just stated. Emily states, Forgiveness means digging up some of the deepest planted roots that for years have kept us from growing. What are your thoughts on that, Jamillah?
That's a longer process, right? That's digging deep. And I love it because we're going to the root of the matter. And no matter what kind of roots you talk about, whether it's food or your hair dye or whatever, roots are where things begin, right? And so if we're digging all the way to where it begins, then we're doing so much for our future. I can't even really just emphasize that enough. It's really worth doing that deep work because yes, we might be reaching into the past, right? Where the roots are planted. However, when we excavate all of that, when we get that out, we have all that space for the present and the future to put something else better in its place. And because of that, we can show up as a better person, a better version of ourselves.
Wow. The chat is just, they really like that. The one listener is like, digging up the roots today, or I'm going to get my tools right now. So they are really, really being appreciative, of how you frame that. Well, Jamillah, it has just been awesome once again having you with us to talk about this part of, the Dear Mom series and, mom guilt and shame. And I wanted to let our listeners know, for more information about this, they can subscribe to our YouTube channel or check out our other clinicians if they need to seek therapy at urbanhealingcounseling.com. So again, Jamillah, thank you so much for giving us these pearls of wisdom, and we do look forward to seeing you again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure.